So if you're not sure how to get good execution or what good execution looks like, this video is for you. So on this Mondays with Moriniki, we're going to actually finish our execution series and talk about kind of what is required in order to be achieving good execution. And so, I think it really, what does good execution require? I think it requires the mastery of four things. And when I say mastery, I'm not talking about perfection. What I am saying is being able to do these four things well, I think then leads to a level of consistent completion. And so that's what we're really kind of focused on. And so the first thing I think that's required is decisions and specifically making them. And if we can have just real talk, I think that we're in a time where people are uncomfortable recognizing that we're humans and we have limitations and we can only do so much. And I think even having to say no or not now or not yet, it just kind of brings up this level of discomfort and almost is like against the culture. Like you need to be grinding, you need to figure it out, you need to be able to do all things and be everything to all people. And I feel like we have to unwind that mindset. And to be clear, I'm all about working hard. I'm all about, pushing yourself and doing as much as you can. And I also recognize that we're humans and we have limitations. We have time constraints. You have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to, do what you have to do with your family if you have one. But then you also just um, have life and lives. And so sometimes there's going to be times when you can push and grind a bit more and other times you can't. And so we have to be honest about what phase and stage of life we're in. And I think that we've started to just glorify the grind to the point that we're overlooking some of the detrimental impact that it has, even on our ability to effectively execute. And so, sometimes I hear people saying like, oh, I just want to help everybody out, but you have to see and say like at what cost. And so I think that where you think about decisions, you have to kind of stop stacking your plate with 20 things and decide like what is actually a priority in this season. What is actually things that need to get done? And instead of just thinking like, oh, I got this one thing done, we need to be honest about, but what five things suffered by me doing this? Do you know what I mean? So when we're not, let me say it differently, when we're not making decisions, when we're not prioritizing, when we're not being clear about what really needs to get done, we're trying to do all of these things and we're not doing all of them as well as we'd like to. And so we're focusing on the, oh, I did these things, but we're not taking stock of the carnage. We're not doing true cost benefit analysis and how overextending yourself and trying to execute across all fronts actually took away from your effectiveness in any of them as well as they could have been. And so, what I want you to do is just ask yourself, does your calendar reflect what you said your priorities are? And so as it comes to decisions, what you have to do is really just kind of list out, the different things that you have as deliverables, as to-dos, etc. And then you need to prioritize them. And you need to refine that list, based on, are there things that I can delegate? Are there things that need to sit with me or can they sit with someone else? But you have to decide, like, what do I have the capacity to do? What's going to get done? What has to move to the next kind of whether it's week, quarter, etc., and just stick with that decision. You have to kind of barring something crazy happening, you have to also then like hold your ground on that. Like you have to make the decision, but then you have to also honor the decisions that you made. And I think that's an area where there's a little bit of struggle bust that happens. Next, you have to be downsizing. And so by this, I mean, you come up with this list of 20 things that you want to do, but the reality is you can't do that. And so you can't do all those things. So you prioritize in what order you're going to get them done. And I would invite you to try to finish things before you move forward to the next thing, because keeping like 50 things in this in progress bucket is part of what's stressing you out. But there's another conversation. But by downsizing, what I want you to start thinking about, and I've talked about this before, is understanding the difference between task and projects. And so part of what happens is that we put these big projects on our list, like I want to get this thing done by a certain date. But what you can do is break that thing down into tasks. And so if it's you wanted to save $10,000 by the end of the quarter, well, what are the things that you need to do? Well, maybe it's I need to put $500 in the bank account every week, or I'm going to skip picking up coffee X number of days, and that saves this amount of money, and I'm going to transfer that over to the bank account. I'm going to cancel certain recurring subscriptions, and I'm going to transfer that over to the bank account. And so, and I'm being like, simplistic in the example on purpose, and just that those are all different tasks that get done, and the aggregate effect of doing all of those things is you reaching the kind of $10,000 savings goal. And so I think that sometimes people just like, I want to save $10,000. And then you put this project on your to-do list, but then your mind is kind of overwhelmed because it hasn't broken it down into a bite-sized, um, actionable next step. And so I use the example of taxes often because I think it's the easiest one. And just in terms of, and you put in like, I need to get my taxes done. Well, that just feels like a lot. That just sounds like a lot versus if you break it down to tasks, like, okay, I need to call my accountant. I need to pull together my receipt. I need to get my old tax returns. I need to download the new Quicken, whatever, TurboTax, sorry. And so, but all of those things you can then be accomplishing and checking things off your list. And this is how, when you're tight for time, you can still be moving the needle on certain things and fitting in those smaller tasks into your calendar because you've actually broken it down in a way where you're like, oh, I can get this done. I can knock this out really quickly. But when you just have, I have to get my taxes done, then that leads to procrastination because you're like, this is going to take me 10 hours or whatever that amount of time is going to take you. And so downsizing isn't about prioritization, which is different. It is about breaking stuff down into simplest form. And so sometimes people take their house and they downsize because they're like, I don't need all this space. I want simple life. I just want to get down to the basics. So think about that with your to-do list. Take all of the things and like break it down into a simple form that is actionable, that's easy for you to digest, and that helps to reduce some of the overwhelm that you're feeling. And so then after that, just start. Because I think that's the other thing is like, don't just make the list. I want you to actually then start on it. I think one of the next things is just around deadlines. And so as it relates to deadlines, first of all, you just need to establish them. It's a measure of accountability, and it gives you something to kind of track against. But you need to be realistic. Like you need to be realistic based on what the kind of competing priorities are, what's on your plate, what your capacity is, and that's different from what your calendar says is open free time. Here's the thing I want folks to kind of start really leaning into is that just because there's a free space on your calendar doesn't mean that you actually have free time. And so, because you may have a project that you need to put in there, which is why, scheduling some of the things that you need to do as appointments is helpful. But beyond that, you may just have come out of board meetings and you maybe need like 30 minutes. Like you have to start thinking about your calendar a little bit more holistically. The game should not be how much crap can I fit into a day? How many minutes can I avoid not having something scheduled for? And I feel like that's where we've kind of lost the plot. And that doesn't make you not productive or not a hard worker. It makes you human and realizing that it is not healthy for you to be trying to say, I sat down at my desk at 6 a.m. and I didn't get up except for a few bio breaks until like midnight. That's wild. And that should not be the gold or standard, but I feel like that's kind of where we've gotten to. And so you have to set some realistic deadlines. You have to stop treating them as optional and a bit more as concrete. And that's like how you look at a hobby versus a job. Like you approach a hobby differently than you approach that job that's writing you that check. And so if you start treating your deadlines and putting a little bit more weight on them, then we take them a little bit more seriously. And so, before you're saying yes to something, you really need to be asking, like, do I have the capacity and the support I need to accomplish what I've listed, by this deadline? And so what I want you to do is kind of review the deadlines that you have. And I want you to look for and check for clusters. And so by clusters, I mean like a lot of times we set all these deadlines, but we don't appreciate that we have like several big projects converging on each other. And so you need to look like, is there any point in time where there's a cluster of things that are all going to be due at the same time that is actually going to make it very difficult for me to execute on these things. And so you need to recalibrate as needed. And sometimes this is going to require you to talk to stakeholders or whomever asked you for it to see if that deadline is more of a preference than an actual due date. Because the reality is, people will tell you the date that they want it, but that's not always the date that they actually need it. And so sometimes you have to be willing to have those conversations as part of that prioritization, as part of establishing those deadlines, so that you can be the most effective across all of the deliverables that you have. And the last thing is distractions. You have to kind of master being better at managing your distractions. And the goal here is not to get them to zero. It's not about saying you're not going to have distractions, but it's about trying to be honest about what are some of the distractions that you already know tend to come up. Maybe you don't know when, but you know, like, well, at some point this week, my manager is going to unexpectedly probably want to talk to me for an hour or two. And so you want to start to build and buffer for some things. Like, you want to be honest, like, most of us scroll for an extended period of time. And so it's not to say that you should never scroll, but it is to say, can I manage that? So for instance, like, I like to brick my phone. Like, brick is a little thing that you tap and it blocks your apps. And but I like it because you have to physically tap it in order for it to unblock it. And most of the time I put it far away from me. So I'm just not going to get up and go unbrick it. It's not that deep. So it keeps me from going on the app. But my point is, that's a way that I manage it, because I also know that when I don't break it, I tend to scroll, and then I will scroll for longer. And so the question is, like, if you looked at your phone, is your screen time only being used for productivity apps? And I guarantee for most of you that is not the case. And so that shows that you have time. You have time. You're on IG, you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn. Yay. You're on YouTube, you're on whatever. And we start saying, like, oh, I just need a break. And breaks are fine, but we use them and doom scroll. And so it's more about the amount of time, because a break is, I'm going to get up and take a 5-minute walk, or I'm going to go get a coffee. Not like, oh, I'm going to look up and it's been 45 minutes to an hour that I've been scrolling. And so now you have stolen time from other things that you're supposed to be doing. And so my thing about this is minimizing distractions that tend to take you off course for longer than you need to be. I think that's the way to think about it, and stop kind of, I guess, we have to stop acting like we don't know what some of them are, and that because then we act like, oh, we're helpless against them, and that's not always the case. And so I think it's really starting to build in some buffer. And that's one of the things, going back to the schedule, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but a lot of times people are trying to build these schedules where they're so proud that they don't have any free time. But I would say your day is already set up for failure, because inevitably there's something that's going to happen that is not scheduled, and you've left no buffer. And so you need to leave buffer for the unexpected. You need to leave some buffer for the distractions. I'm not saying leave 3 hours, but I am saying you might want to build in 30 minutes here or there throughout the day, just so that even when those distractions or things happen, you can, one, be aware of them and get yourself back on course, but two, it doesn't throw your whole calendar off. And so hopefully that's helpful. Again, I think they're just things, they're muscles that you have to kind of build. They're things that you have to work on intentionally, but making those decisions about what's important and then sticking to it, downsizing and breaking down the projects into tasks so that you can have actionable next steps, setting deadlines and adhering to them, and asking for the support you need in order to be able to accomplish those things, and then starting to manage those distractions in a way that minimizes the overall impact to your time and even to your well-being. Because let's be honest, most of the time we get off social media, we just feel worse about many things. So anyways, hopefully that's helpful. We'll be kind of going, I think, in a new direction next week, but I look forward to talking to you then.